Okay, so today we're jumping into a really provocative idea. What if the answer to our biggest problems isn't just, a new economic policy, but completely replacing the entire field of economics? Yeah, you heard that right. Let's get into it. So the whole thing kicks off with this really powerful quote. And it makes you think, right? Fields of study, they don't just kind of evolve. Sometimes they just become obsolete. They become relics. And that happens when the world's problems change so much that the old way of thinking, well, it can't even come up with the right questions anymore, let alone the answers. Which, of course, brings us to the big question for today's explainer. Has economics hit that wall? I mean, think about the challenges we're facing now. Climate change, resource depletion. Are these problems so fundamentally different that the basic logic of economics just isn't fit for purpose anymore? Right, so we're not talking about small tweaks here. The idea is something called a disciplinary succession. It's a total replacement. Think about it like this. Ecology didn't just reform natural history, it completely replaced it. Or how public health came along as a brand new field, totally separate from medicine. We're talking about that scale of change, a complete changing of the guard. And this slide really hammers home just how big this idea is. This is not just another heterodox school of thought, trying to get a seat at the academic table. No, no. The argument here is that we need a fundamentally new map for reality. Because as the thinking goes, the old map, well, it's basically leading us straight off a cliff. So why the radical move? Why is this old map supposedly failing us? Well, it's pretty simple, actually. The territory, our crazy, complex 21st century world, it's changed completely. But the map we're using to navigate it, it hasn't. And here's the core of the problem, according to this argument. Mainstream economics has these huge blind spots. It just doesn't really know how to deal with the fact that, we live on a finite planet with very real physical limits. So things like decaying bridges, shrinking water supplies, or all the unpaid work that keeps society running, they get labeled as externalities, which is basically a fancy way of saying they're just footnotes to the real story of market efficiency. This right here, this slide shows the shift in thinking perfectly. The old question, the one economics has been asking forever, is how do markets allocate scarce resources? But the new question is so much more direct, more grounded. It's how do we, as a society, actually provide for everyone's needs, food, shelter, health, in a way that can last? See the difference? It's a huge shift from abstract markets to real, tangible provision. Okay, so if economics is the old, outdated map, what's the new one? Well, the proposed name for this new discipline is Human Provisioning Systems, or HPS for short. At the very heart of HPS is this idea of real capital. Now, this is crucial. We're not talking about money in a bank or stocks and bonds. We're talking about the actual, tangible stuff a society needs to survive and thrive. In this framework, financial capital is just a claim on all that real stuff. I mean, think about it. You can't print more clean water, and you can't print more skilled nurses, right? And this real capital gets broken down into four big interconnected buckets. First, you've got natural capital. That's our ecosystems, energy, raw materials. Then there's human capital, our health, our skills, our knowledge. Next is social capital, things like trust, our institutions, how we govern ourselves. And finally, built capital, all our infrastructure, our tools, our machines. The argument is that a truly healthy society has to take care of all four of these, not just one. And this is maybe the most important part. The whole goal of the system changes. With HPS, the number one goal is not growing GDP. Not at all. The goal is to make sure everyone's basic needs are met, that we can keep doing it for a long, long time, and that we do it all within the physical limits of our planet. That is a massive shift in what we're even trying to achieve. Okay, I know what you might be thinking. This all sounds a little academic, maybe even like a fantasy. But what's interesting is that the source material lays out a surprisingly practical step-by-step plan for how a new discipline like this could actually be born, based on how it's happened before in history. So here's the 20-year roadmap. The idea isn't to go and declare war on existing economics departments. That's not going to work. Instead, you start small. You create a few courses and you embed them in other programs like sustainability or public policy. From there, you build up to master's programs, then dedicated research centers. And over time, you create a whole new professional identity. And this is where it gets super concrete and you can really see it. What would someone with a degree in HPS actually do? Well, they wouldn't be your typical economist. They'd be a municipal resilience planner, or maybe an infrastructure sufficiency auditor.
These are totally new kinds of roles designed to answer these new kinds of questions. And yeah, these jobs barely exist right now because the field of study that would train people for them doesn't exist yet either.
Okay, so we've got a new map, and we've got our roadmap to get there. But why now? What's the rush? Why is this idea popping up with so much force right at this moment?
Well, the argument is that there are three big forces all hitting us at once. First, plain and simple, economic failure. The current models are just having a really hard time explaining what's going on with inflation, housing, and energy. Second, governments are being forced back into the game of making sure people have the basics: energy, food, security. And third, that bedrock assumption of perpetual, endless growth, well, it's starting to look pretty shaky as a basis for planning our future. So you put those three things together, and you get this huge vacuum, a vacuum that a discipline like HPS is perfectly designed to fill.
And this leads to a really powerful way of looking at it. The goal here isn't to compete with economics or, win some academic debate. The goal is to prepare for its irrelevance. It's about building the replacement discipline now so it's ready to go when the old models, finally, officially, can't solve our biggest problems anymore. So that leaves us with this one last, really provocative thought. This whole proposal, this entire idea, it all hinges on one big assumption, that we are facing an unavoidable problem. A problem so huge and so fundamental that none of our existing ways of thinking can solve it. So the question to leave you with is, what is that problem? And are we really ready to start building the new tools we're going to need to face it?